Okay,
Okay.
and we are live. Perfect.
Okay.
Well, I would like to start by welcoming everybody who has joined us for this Philanthropy University webinar. I'm really excited to welcome Sejuti Basu from Pragya, who is joining us today from India. And my name is Mark Goldstein. I am a Senior Associate of Community here at Philanthropy University, and I'm so excited to be able to host this webinar today on project management. This is something that is a topic that I know a lot of the people in the course are so interested in hearing about, and hearing somebody who is doing great work out in the field talk about. So the goal of this session is to hear about project management application in a nonprofit organization out in the field and in day-to-day work. And Sejuti is kind enough to be sharing some insight with us today. So with that, I'd like to turn it over, Sejuti, to let you introduce yourself and introduce Pragya and the type of work that you're doing.
Okay, thanks, Mark. First of all, I would like to apologize. I might have a poor internet connection because I'm in a remote Indian Himalayan town right now. And also, don't be alarmed. We have an Indian festival going on here, and people are bursting crackers. So you might hear a few in the background. I'm Sejuti. I'm from Pragya, India. I head the research and advocacy team in Pragya. And as part of the research team, I also look at monitoring and evaluation for various programs in Pragya. I've been with the organization for over 12 years now. And to give you a brief introduction on Pragya, we started in 1995. The primary focus was conservation of biodiversity and rare medicinal plants species. And we have gradually diversified to work on various thematic areas, including food security, livelihoods, adapting to climate change, disaster management, education, healthcare, women empowerment. As we go on interacting with the communities, we understand the needs, the programmatic requirements, and our programs evolve accordingly. And we started as an organization which works primarily with very remote, difficult to reach last mile communities. In India, we started with communities above 8,000 feet in the Himalayas. We now also work with people who are living in deserts or forested areas, or even river islands that are flooded almost every year. And from India, we are now also working currently in Nepal, Bangladesh, Kenya, and we also have two sister organizations in UK and in the US who helps us with fundraising as well. We also have a very strong focus on research and advocacy. In India, we are recognized as a scientific industrial research organization by the Ministry of Science and Technology. And we also have special consultative status with the UN Economic Social Council. So we try to leverage these platforms for research and advocacy work. And we have a diverse portfolio, as I mentioned. So from natural resource management, appropriate technology, renewable energy, disaster management, food security, women empowerment, livelihoods is a cross-cutting theme all across. And yeah, so I look forward to interacting with you and answering some of the questions as we go along.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction. Um, I'm so excited to be able to ask some questions, including some that come directly from learners from the project management course that submitted questions in anticipation of this event. So I'd love to start with thinking about the beginning of a project. So when you're at the very beginning of a new project, what are some of the most important aspects to consider? So what is your approach to the initial stages of a project to make sure that it begins successfully?
Right. So initially, we work with all the teams in the organization, trying to build uh, understanding of the specific program, understanding of our stakeholders. Um, we try to map all the resources available apart from the project budget. Locally with the local institutions, the local government, what are the different procedures that we would have to follow as part of the project, what are the risks involved. Since many times we are working with the community and the government to make sure the projects are sustainable, it's very important to understand all the community networks and the procedures, the government procedures, and we try to make sure that there is no gap in communication between the fundraising team that designed the project, obviously in a participatory way, and also once the final project design is in, the implementation team and the monitoring team, there is no lack of communication. So we do start with a staff briefing. We make sure everyone is on the same page related to what the project wants to achieve, what are the methodologies that we are talking about. Then one of the first steps is to finalize and formalize the project Gantt. So it might be a 1 year project, it might be a 3 year or 5 year project, and we make sure that everyone knows what are the assigned milestones, how we are going to achieve things over the next few years, and from that we make sure that these are converted into annual GANs, because we also have a financial reporting and all that on an annual basis. So how the project timelines align with the annual timelines that we try to make sure. And so this brings us the monthly Gantt over the next 1 year. And we also, as we move to the subsequent years, we take note of whatever are the pending deliverables from the first year and incorporate them. These are then broken down into GANs for every 15 days, fortnightly Gantt. So we make sure there is enough scope to review the progress we are making, scope for course correction, and we are not losing time before we make these decisions. So we don't want to waste a month or 2 months and then find out if we have we have made some mistakes or there are some course correction required. So we make sure that every 15 days we are preparing for what is coming up in the next 15 days and incorporate whatever didn't get done in those fortnights. So this Gantt is a very important tool for us, and we make sure that the program team, the thematic experts, as well as the monitoring team, the field level teams who are executing the projects, they're all aware of their specific targets and how they're going to proceed. And then we also start with the beneficiary selection and baseline process. One of the crucial aspect is to identify the key beneficiaries and the stakeholders. We usually do orientation meetings at state level, district level, village level as it is required. And we also work with the communities themselves, so be it the women's group or with the elected representatives or with the farmers, whoever we are implementing the projects with, to identify who would be the final direct beneficiaries of the project. Usually, all projects have some components of awareness or capacity building, which more or less covers the entire community. But in case there are some specific installations, like say toilets or solar pumps, so we need to identify who are the most deprived groups or deprived households and try and get the benefits across to them as much as possible. And we make sure this is done in a participative manner so that there are no conflicts or grievances later on. And then we also start with the noting the baseline of this particular beneficiary households, and so that we can track how we are achieving, how we are progressing across the project duration. So these are a few key things to get started with. And also for each particular project, we make sure there might be different activities. So we are doing trainings, we are doing certain installations like we mentioned, or we are doing large-scale workshops, working group sessions, or we are setting up plantations. So we make sure in case the project is being implemented, there are large projects where we implement across, say, 11 districts, 12 districts, or 6 districts. So to maintain the same quality across all the districts and make sure everyone, including our field staff or our extension workers who are interacting with the communities, so they are on the same page, we develop small guidelines, like say 1 or maximum 2 pages, very brief with bullets, so that we are clear about what are the targets, what we are trying to achieve, who are the participants that are going to be, or in case it's an installation, what are the technical components, what is the minimum level we need to achieve, so that there is a uniform minimum level that is set. So these are the preparatory work that goes into initiation of our project.
Great. Thank you so much for that comprehensive view. I think the beginning of a project is one that a lot of learners have asked about because it's so crucial to the eventual success or failure is how you're able to prepare for the project. I see one question already that came in that I think is worth addressing, which comes from Ike Chukwu, which is how do you adjust a plan for a very small team? So, for instance, a team of 5. So, if you have to deal with a very small group, does that change the calculus at all for how you plan a project? Do you have any advice on working on a small team, or is most of the advice consistent whether you're a group of 5 or a group of 50?
I think it's important to plan ahead, and so usually with a small team you have a benefit that there is less communication gap. You are a very small cohesive group and you usually know what's going on, and it's easier for you to share information and step in as and when required. And it's when you have a very large, diverse team across multiple geographic location, that's when more of this structured approach of documentation and planning comes in. But to make sure that we are achieving the project targets in a timely manner, and we have enough time for required course correction. The planning, regular reporting, checking the GANs and the milestones is important. So make sure you have your regular meetings, even within a small team. Make sure everyone is on page. Have a regular catch up. So we usually do a 15 days kind of a review and the detailed review in a 3 months. So by then we get to know whether we are making any progress. In case there are any specific hindrances, if we need to involve any other experts, so we get to know in those quarterly 3 months meetings. So make sure you are sharing, communicating with your teammates regularly.
That's great. Thank you for following up. It sounds like having some structure and a cadence for how often you're going to check in is really crucial to the success of a project, whether it's a small team or a large team.
Right.
Great. Well, on that note, in terms of a successful project that you can remember working on sometime in the last few years at Pragya, can you tell me what made it so successful from a project management standpoint? What are some best practices that you can share in terms of a success story of managing a project?
Right. So we had a very successful project where we were working on medicinal plants cultivation. So we were using cultivation as a tool to preserve or protect the species in the wild. So these are very rare medicinal plants species, mostly found in the forests in the Himalayas. Some of them are endangered, listed by IUCN or CITES. Their trade is banned in many cases, but they have a very high market demand for the herbal medicines. So people harvest them. There are destructive harvesting in many cases. The plants in the wild were getting lost. So we came up with the strategy of cultivating these medicinal plants. So I think what worked for this particular project was that we engaged with all the stakeholders throughout the entire value chain in all steps of the project. So, for example, we did a very detailed survey where we mapped over 2,000 this rare medicinal plant species, what are their usage, how threatened they are in the wild areas, and also worked with the government, the Ministry of Forests, the Medicinal Plants Board, and tried to bring them on board on what is the current status, why we need to work on their preservation. And we also worked with the communities who were harvesting these. So we worked with traditional healers, one of the main users of medicinal herbs. We worked with farmers because we had to convince them that there is a market for them, and that although some of these are very rare, they take from 6 months to even 3 to 4 years to grow, that they will bring them enough benefit. And we also engaged with the buyers. So we have large pharmaceutical industries who are buying these products, and so also to make sure that they understand the value of it. And also, since the entire world is moving towards sustainable economy, traceability of where the plants are coming from, and so that entire sort of regime, the regulatory regime. So we worked with all the stakeholders to make sure everyone is on board with what we are doing and why it may work. And we also worked with the farmers as well as pastoral groups, the women. So everyone had to contribute in some particular way. So, for example, we were working with women on aromatic species, or in their kitchen garden, they could plant some species and get benefits with them. And we make sure that there was enough input in the initial stage, trying to build that confidence in the farmers that cultivating these species would work. We worked with local, the universities in the high altitude, the experts to develop the cultivation protocols, how to cultivate this particular herbs, and worked with them to train our farmers. And we also made sure that they were provided a sort of opportunity cost, because initially they were not sure of whether it will work in 3 years. And so if they're allocating the plot for say 3 years, what they're getting in return. So we had to pay a small rent for the initial phase of the project, so that people are not demotivated and they still maintain those plantations. And now we have seen, like, from the groups that had like 6 farmers, they have grown into group of 40 farmers, then into 600 farmers.
Wow.
They have formed a farmer cooperative, and we have made sure that they are aware of all the market prices in the local market as well as farm market, and how they can bypass the middlemen and sell directly to the large pharmaceutical companies. So we conduct annual or biannual meetings with the buyers, and so that they also have a diverse group to choose from, and make sure that they, whatever they're cultivating, they have a market linkage for that. So we facilitate the farmers with the knowledge of what the current market prices are, so that they can negotiate with the traders accordingly. And they have, many of them, they have a turnover of even 1.2 million. So that's the kind of Indian rupees. So that's the kind of strength they have got over that period of time. I think what worked was the strong project design, where we were working on a holistic manner right from the beginning to the end for marketing, and we engaged with different stakeholders. We made sure that the livelihoods of the farmers are protected, because we understood no one would get the conservation message, that why these medicinal plants need to be protected and how we can protect it till their livelihoods are addressed. So we had a lot of awareness programs. We had ethnobotanic museums that were set up to engage people to know about their heritage. We worked with the forest department on campaigns and rallies. We set up community protected areas where people could protect these plants. We had exposure visits and so on. So there was a lot of awareness components to it, as well as a very strong livelihood component, which sort of motivated people to go on. And also we highlighted that this project was in the high altitude Himalayas. So there are certain plants that only grow at, like, say 12,000 or 14,000 feet altitude. So only the farmers there, they could cultivate this in the entire country. So they had a competitive advantage, so to say. And we sort of tried to bank on that and get them into the market linkages. And also the kind of consultations we did, working with all the stakeholders, from farmers, traditional healers, all the industry people, researchers, government. So bringing everyone on board was crucial, and that's how it has worked. And even the government has adopted the same model. now, and it's being implemented across multiple states in India currently.
That's so great to hear about. Thank you for the really detailed look at the project. It sounds like really meaningfully engaging with all of the stakeholders from the very beginning of a project and working with them throughout the project is really crucial to the success. And it sounds like you had tremendous success with that project.
Yes.
That's so great to hear. I'd love to now feature a question that came in from a learner, Atalaya Sergi, which is, what advice can you give on getting your organization's leadership on board with a more formalized approach to project management? This is something that I think a lot of people in the course are thinking about, is applying more of a structure of project management at an organization that might not have one yet. In your experience or from your insight, what advice could you give learners who face that issue?
Right. I think that's a great question that even as we evolve as an organization, all of us, we face that challenge. It's very important to have your leaders or the board on board, to understand why project management is crucial. I would suggest that you can have a meeting with them, highlighting why is it important. I think as you are learning in the course, what are the different approaches that might be suitable for your organization, as well as why it is important for your organization to adopt that structured approach. So you can highlight that it helps achieve the goals within the scheduled time and the budget that is available to you under a specific project, and to make sure that you are not facing excessive delays, or you are being able to meet all the targets within the specific budget. Also, the project management makes course correction easier. So when you have all these tools of tracking the uh, deliverables, the milestones on a timely manner, it helps your course correction much easier. And because there are many challenges, so it might be to do with geographic or weather related. There might be certain floods or disasters that disrupts the schedule, or there might be some social challenges that comes up. There are always political elections and things that affect some of our projects, and so it's very important to have regular course correction to make sure we are achieving our goals under the project. And also, when you have a very structured project management approach, you know what exactly your resources are, in terms of financial resources or human resources, and you make sure that you are utilizing them effectively. Everyone has the same shared the burden of work. We know how the project is spaced across the entire year or along the project duration, so you are able to utilize the resources properly. And so it's very important to point this out to your leadership or the board members. And you can also talk about how it contributes towards achieving the goal, not just the project that your organization has. So, in terms of your strategic plan, your strategic priorities, or what your organization's goal is. So, how the project management can help deliver towards those goals, and also how you are meeting the donor requirements in terms of deliverables, how you can stick to the reporting schedules with a very effective project management, because you know when each activity is being done, when the data is coming in, how you're compiling. So it makes everything so much easier. So this is something that you need to get across to the leadership, and I'm sure they would be totally on board to take this approach.
That's great advice. Yeah, it sounds like it can be really powerful to frame the case for formalized project management in the organizational goals and the constraints and deadlines, because it seems like with all of that structure in place, it's a lot easier to meet those. So that's a really interesting perspective. Thank you for sharing. I think the next question is about challenges or failures in project management. So a learner, Clara Deleda Nanchinga, asked, what has been your biggest challenge in project management? And I think it would be great if you could reflect on the biggest challenge and also some common areas that cause a failure of a project.
Right. So, yes, we always have to be prepared for the challenges that might exist because of which we have designed the project, or challenges that might crop up as we are implementing a project. For us, much of the challenges are related to the geographic area that we operate in. So most of our areas are like very remote and difficult to reach. We do not have um, internet or phone access in many of these areas. So many times we have to work with tools or reporting tools that allows working offline or feeding in data offline and then transferring it online. We also have to make sure the schedule is aligned to a lot of festivals or the harvesting seasons that the communities have, because that's when they're very busy and they may not be able to listen to all the meetings or the training events or participate effectively in that. So we make sure we are aware of those schedules and customize our annual Gantt, sometimes even by the project districts. So because everyone has a different festival calendar, or they might have like every 5 years they have elections. So we need to be aware of those things. Or sometimes, like say in some of the mountain districts, we do not have access to them for 6 months. So we have a team which stays with them locally, but we cannot get into that zone for at least 6 months because it's snowbound. So we have to make sure our project management and communication, reporting, everything is aligned to that. So we have a very short window to operate. There are certain areas which get flooded every year during the monsoon. So we know that those particular 2-3 months, we cannot achieve the pace of the project would be slow. So that kind of customization we have to do. Also, one of the challenges, or I would say what we have to manage, is managing the motivation of the community as well as the staff right from the start. So initially, we have to put in a lot of effort in convincing people, managing their expectations so that they do not have an expectation which we won't be able to meet at the end of the project. So we clearly set out that this is what we are going to deliver, or this is not within the scope of the project. So they do not feel disappointed along the way. And also during the middle of the project. So sometimes the project starts off very well with a lot of expectation, a lot of fresh enthusiasm, energy. But some of these, like say even the medicinal plants cultivation work that I talked about, so it takes time to see the benefits. Also, especially in the projects where we are trying to bring about change in your mindset. So be it in a awareness on water sanitation or those kind of things, where or we are addressing cultural barriers to address violence against women. So there, the changing mindsets, the knowledge, attitude, behavior, it takes a lot of time. So during the middle of the project, it's also very important to keep the staff motivated, learn from the setbacks as well as look at the positives that have come along, and keep engaging with the community to keep them motivated. And another thing is also like we try to focus not as independent projects, small time bound ones. We try to make sure how we deliver long term programs so that we have engagement with the same communities over a longer period. We are able to provide hand holding so that the project doesn't fade away as soon as the funding or the resources are exhausted, and we are able to have a lasting effect.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. I'm curious. You've mentioned in these different projects, they're pretty complex. There's a lot of stakeholders. It requires a lot of effort, constant communication, managing relationships. There's a lot to project management. And we had a learner ask, Sarab Raman asked about assessing for risk and mitigating risk. And so I wonder what your strategy is for identifying the risks that are involved in the projects that you're managing and trying to mitigate for them. Do you have any advice to those who are doing the same thing on the projects that they're working on?
Right. So we try to, as we initiate the project, we try to map out who are the different stakeholders, what can be the potential risk. Sometimes these might evolve as we go on, and we might need to change our strategies accordingly. So sometimes we do work with groups who are difficult to bring them on board, and our strategy might be to engage them in a different manner. So, for example, we are working with on women empowerment and addressing violence against women. So, be it in a domestic sphere or as well as public sphere, and we are working in quite remote and closed communities, culturally very unique communities, and they're not so open to interference from outside. And we also realize that the men, the patriarchal society, they might have an issue when we go and start talking to them about these particular aspects. And we had a lot of activities which have focused also capacity building of women, building their leadership skills, building peer groups to bring them together so that they have a support structure in their neighborhood so that they can stand up against violence and speak up. So while we were doing this in the preparatory phase, at least for first about a year and a half, we also focused on other aspects of community building. So we were also engaging with men. We worked on nutrition, which is for the entire family, where we are also talking about children's nutrition, nutrition of the entire household. We also talked about farming. We talked about government programs, how to access them. We talked about skill building, and so we engaged with the entire community so they didn't see us as a threat or as someone trying to alter their culture. So they saw as the benefits they're receiving for these small programs. And we also chose these aspects because here you can see quick results, and you can see if you're harvesting vegetables in another 3 months, you can see, okay, the household is benefiting, so the organization is doing some good, so they are not a threat to us. And also we had centers set up to help women to register cases. We operated helplines. We did trainings for women leaders, but we called, so although they were planned as a social legal support kiosk, we gave them a very generic nomenclature called Empowerment Center. And it was a center open to everyone. And so people could come and ask about where they could get a government subsidy for a farm tool, or where they can enroll in a course, or we ran different courses in the center itself. And whereas it also, the primary function of the center was also to help register cases for the survivors of violence. But we didn't want that stigma attached to it, so that if someone approaches that center, that means something has happened to her. So we wanted people to come to that center freely, discuss. So we had counseling rooms, separate sessions available for women, but we also ran other programs to make sure there is no stigma attached to to that center. So we were also disseminating weather information, farmer advice for vegetables, what to do in case there is a pest attack to their crops, and so they could see a lot of other benefits to the center and help that center perform and do different kind of events. So it's very important to understand what are the stakeholders, what kind of issues they might have, what kind of threats they might pose, and then try and address those as we go on in the project. So it has to be built in the project strategy. So even if it is not factored in at the design phase, and you find out a particular issue as you go on implementing the project, you can raise additional resources, or bring other stakeholders on board who are like-minded, and work with them to develop and deliver those additional sort of activities to overcome the hurdles that you are facing. So that way the project management and the strategization, even tracking the GANs and course connection on a regular basis would help you.
Great. Well, thank you. I think we have time for one more question, really.
Okay.
And I'm wondering now, reflecting on all of this great experience that you've had managing projects at a really impactful organization, I think that's something that a lot of learners are trying to replicate in their own organizations around the world, or something they aspire to. In your experience, what is the best advice that you have gotten about managing a successful project for the social impact space? Or what is some advice that you think you want to pass on to the learners that are tuning in today, or that are in the course? What are the most important aspects of managing successful, impactful projects?
Right. So I would probably like to say that we need to understand that none of the initiatives or the projects as we implement, it may not be a smooth path throughout. And that's a natural process. There would be hurdles, there would be things that we didn't account for, or as we implement, things might change, or as you interact with the communities, or even our natural environment is changing. So there might be difficulties that come up. And we need to understand that it is not going to be a smooth ride. So that's why it's so important to have all these project management tools, so that we can sort of deal with it in a timely manner and in a planned fashion. And also, I would say the best advice that we've got would be that it's very important to consult with all the stakeholders beforehand. So right from our primary beneficiaries to all the stakeholders who have a role to play in that project. So in case it's a project addressing gender-based violence, so apart from the women and girls themselves, we also have the teachers or mentors in a community. We have the men and boys. We have the law enforcement agencies. We have the government departments. We have other civil societies who are working in the same space, and we need to understand what role they play and how we can link with them. Uh, Again, similarly, if we are working on a livelihood project, so it's very important to understand the requirements and the deficiencies that the main beneficiaries might have. So, be it if we are working with farmers or women's groups or pastoralists and nomadic groups, and again, who else we are engaging with. So sometimes it might be forest department, other government departments, irrigation department, as well as the final buyers of the product, so that we ensure there is enough revenue. How do we going to market this? What are the platforms, even including information and communication technology that we are going to leverage? So it's a lot of stakeholders to take into account and get everyone on board. Nurture these relationships right from the beginning, and also empower the community. So one of the motto of Pragya is development without destruction. So we believe in sustainable development and not compromising the ecological balance, and empowerment for enabling choices. So we make sure that the community gets to decide how they want to progress. We just give them the right tools and build their capacity to do so. So that is very important. So this is absolutely necessary even for sustainability of the project, and also to make sure that it blends with their culture, their thinking, and makes sure that the project is sustainable. And also keep assessing and improving all the time. So from we when we implement a project and doing a regular check, we try not to use the term monitoring. We because we are not just collecting the data, we make sure that all data that is collected, it's used for assessing and improving. So that is very important, even for your course correction, or sort of delivering the best that we can for the communities we are working with, or the ecological or the landscapes that we are working with. So it's very important to make sure that we are moving in the right direction. So continually assessing and improving is a good idea.
Great. That's such helpful insight. It sounds like understanding at the beginning of the project that it's not all going to go smoothly, and that you're planning for risks, and you can have some structure in place to be able to adapt to whatever risks or issues you're facing, and really making sure that you are not just monitoring data, but using it consistently to make decisions and inform your strategy. Those were two of the things you mentioned that stood out to me, but I think it's such good advice and such helpful insight. And I think we could talk about this probably for a few more hours, but I think we're just about out of time. I want to thank all of the learners who tuned in today, and all of the learners who might be watching this video not live, but after the fact. I'm posting a very quick 3-minute feedback form in the live chat. I would love to hear from the learners about what you liked, what you didn't. Please be totally honest. We're really excited to have run this for the first time today, and hope to continue it in the future. Sejuti, I also want to thank you so much. You're doing such great work. Pragya is an amazing organization. We love featuring you in the project management course, and I know that I learned a lot just by listening to you today. So thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mark. And I would like to thank everyone who has joined it to the course and to this particular event. And I wish you all the best.
Great. Well, Sejuti, good luck with your work in the field, and have a great evening. And to the learners all over the globe who tuned in today, thank you, and good luck finishing the course, and happy learning.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you very much.